My daughter said, "I've decided to rent out your house. You're moving in with us and will live in the basement." I laughed and then did something that made her turn pale. "I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled." I never thought I'd become one of those elderly women with a difficult daughter story. But life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? My name is Margaret, and at 72, I'd built what I thought was a comfortable life. My husband Robert had passed 5 years earlier, leaving me our 3-bedroom house in a quiet Portland suburb, fully paid off, thank God. The mortgage had been cleared years ago, and I'd been living on Robert's pension and my savings quite comfortably. I gardened, volunteered at the library twice a week, and hosted book club every other Thursday. It was a simple life, but it was mine. My daughter Jessica was 45, married to a man named Derek for 15 years. They had 2 children, Emma, 13, and Kyle, 10. I loved my grandchildren dearly, though I'll admit I'd noticed something shifting in Jessica over the past year. She'd become calculating. There's no other word for it. It started small, little comments here and there. "Mom, this house is really too big for you, isn't it?" Or, "You know, property taxes must be killing you." They weren't, actually, but I'd just smile and change the subject, assuming it was her way of showing concern. Then came the visits. Jessica started dropping by more frequently, always with Derek. They'd walk through my house with these appraising looks, touching the crown molding, commenting on the good bones of the place, discussing the neighborhood's rising property values. At first, I thought they were just making conversation. How naive I was. The questions became more pointed. How much was the house worth now? Had I thought about what would happen to it when I was gone? Wouldn't it be easier to downsize? Each time, I deflected. This was my home. The place where Robert and I had raised Jessica, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where his memory lived in every corner. I wasn't ready to leave it, and I certainly didn't need to. But Jessica was persistent. She began bringing up articles about elderly people who'd fallen and couldn't get help, about seniors who'd been scammed, about the dangers of living alone. "I worry about you, Mom," she'd say, her voice dripping with false concern. Derek would nod solemnly beside her, playing his part perfectly. The truth revealed itself on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Jessica and Derek arrived unannounced, never a good sign. I'd been in my garden, planting tulip bulbs for spring, when I heard their car in the driveway. They didn't wait for me to come inside. Jessica marched straight into the backyard, Derek trailing behind her. "Mom, we need to talk," Jessica announced, her tone businesslike. No hello, no how are you. Just straight to business. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. "About what, dear?" Jessica pulled out her phone, showing me something I couldn't quite see in the afternoon sun. "I've been doing research. Derek and I have made a decision." My stomach tightened. Something about her voice, cold, final, sent warning bells ringing through my mind. "I've decided to rent out your house," Jessica said, as casually as if she were discussing the weather. "You're moving in with us. There's room in the basement. We've already cleared it out." I stared at her. Surely I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The basement is actually quite nice," Derek added quickly. "We put in new carpet last month. There's a bathroom down there and—" "You decided?" I interrupted, looking at my daughter. "You decided about my house?" Jessica's jaw tightened, the same expression she'd had as a teenager when someone dared to disagree with her. "Mom, be reasonable. This house is wasting its potential just sitting here with you in it. Do you know how much rental income it could generate? The market is incredible right now, and you'd be with family. It's the perfect solution." Solution to what problem? My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. "The problem of you rattling around in this big house when you should be somewhere safe, where we can keep an eye on you," Jessica said, her tone sharpening. "This is happening, Mom. Derek's already talked to a property manager. We can have tenants in here by the first of the month. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sheer audacity, the breathtaking entitlement of it all. It was almost funny. Jessica's face paled slightly. What's so amusing? That's when I made my decision. I smiled at my daughter, really smiled, and said 4 words that would change everything over my dead body. After Jessica and Derek left, Jessica fuming, Derek looking uncomfortable, I sat in my kitchen for over an hour, just staring at the wall. Had my daughter really just tried to steal my house? Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Theft, dressed up in concern and family obligation? The basement? They wanted me to live in a basement like some discarded piece of furniture, while they profited from the home I'd spent 30 years making into a sanctuary. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I made myself tea, but it went cold before I could drink it. What scared me most wasn't the audacity, it was the planning. They'd already cleared out the basement. Derek had already talked to a property manager. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. They'd been scheming for months, probably longer. All those visits, those questions about the house's value, the concerned comments about me living alone, it had all been reconnaissance. I thought about calling Jessica back, trying to reason with her. But I knew my daughter. Once she'd set her mind on something, she became like a dog with a bone. And Derek, weak-willed Derek, would never stand up to her. He never had. The real question was, what could they actually do? Legally, I mean. This was my house. My name was on the deed, mine alone. Robert had made sure of that before he died, knowing how important financial independence was to me. Jessica had no legal claim to it. She couldn't just force me out. Could she? But then I remembered stories I'd heard. Elderly people declared incompetent by family members. Guardianships. Conservatorships. Those horrible situations where adult children took control of their parents' lives, their finances, their homes. It happened all the time, and often the court sided with the younger generation. Was that Jessica's plan? To have me declared unfit somehow? Fear coiled in my stomach like a snake. I was 72, yes, but I was healthy, sharp. I managed my own finances, drove my own car, took care of my home and garden. There was nothing wrong with me. But would that matter if Jessica found the right lawyer, the right doctor, the right judge? I needed to protect myself. But how? That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, my bed, in my home, and thought about what Robert would have done. He'd always been the strategic one, the chess player who thought 5 moves ahead. Margaret, he'd say, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Jessica had shown me exactly who she was. Someone willing to exploit her own mother for financial gain. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I needed to act first, before Jessica could put whatever plan she had into motion. I needed to protect my assets, my autonomy, and my home. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. Professional help. After breakfast, I pulled out my address book. Inside was the business card of Eleanor Hartman, an attorney I'd met at book club. She specialized in elder law and had once given an informal talk to our group about estate planning and protecting seniors from financial exploitation. At the time, I'd thought it was interesting, but not personally relevant. How wrong I'd been. I called Eleanor's office at 9 o'clock sharp. I need to make an appointment, I told the receptionist. It's urgent. May I ask what this is regarding? I paused, then said quietly, my daughter is trying to take my house. There must have been something in my voice. Desperation, perhaps, or determination, because the receptionist said, can you come in this afternoon? Mrs. Hartman had a cancellation at 2 o'clock. I'll be there, I said. The rest of the morning, I gathered documents: the deed to my house, my bank statements, Robert's will, my medical records from my last checkup 3 months ago, showing I was in excellent health for my age, Jessica's recent texts and emails. I even found a notebook and began writing down everything I could remember: every conversation, every suspicious visit, every comment about the house. Was I being paranoid? Maybe. But Jessica's words kept echoing in my mind. "This is happening, Mom." Not if I had anything to say about it. At 1:30, I changed into my best dress, navy blue, professional, and drove to Eleanor's office downtown. My heart was pounding, but my resolve was solid. This was my home, my life, and I'd be damned if I'd let anyone take it from me without a fight. Eleanor Hartman's office was exactly what I needed that afternoon: calm, professional, reassuring. She was in her mid-50s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a manner that made me feel heard rather than humored. I laid out everything: the documents, my notes, the entire confrontation in my garden. Eleanor listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to be direct with you. Your daughter has no legal standing to take your house or force you to move. None whatsoever." Relief flooded through me. So, I'm safe? From an immediate seizure? Yes. But Eleanor held up a finger. "What concerns me is the pattern you're describing. This sounds like the beginning of what we call undue influence, or potentially a setup for a guardianship petition." My blood ran cold. Guardianship? It's when someone petitions the court to be appointed as another person's guardian, claiming that person is no longer capable of making their own decisions. It's meant to protect vulnerable adults, but sometimes— She paused delicately. "It's abused by family members who stand to benefit financially." What would Jessica need to do that? She'd need medical evidence that you're incompetent, documentation from doctors, psychiatrists. She'd need to prove you can't manage your own affairs. Given what you've told me about your health and mental clarity, that should be nearly impossible. But nearly isn't the same as completely. Eleanor leaned forward. "Here's what I recommend. First, we need to make your wishes crystal clear and legally bulletproof. We'll update your will, create a living trust, establish durable power of attorney, but naming someone other than Jessica. Do you have anyone you trust completely?" I thought for a moment. "My sister, Helen. She lives in Seattle, but we're very close." "Perfect. Second, I want you to get a complete medical evaluation: cognitive function, mental health, physical health, everything. We need documentation that you're of sound mind and body. Can you do that this week?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Third, I need you to start documenting everything: every interaction with Jessica, every text, every phone call. If she shows up unannounced, make notes immediately afterward: dates, times, what was said. Can you do that?" "I've already started." I showed her my notebook. Eleanor smiled for the first time. "You're going to be fine, Mrs. Patterson. You're sharp, you're organized, and you're taking action. That's exactly what you need to do." We spent the next 2 hours going through paperwork. Eleanor's paralegal prepared documents while we talked. By the time I left her office at 5 o'clock, I had appointments scheduled with my doctor for a complete evaluation, papers to sign once they were finalized, and a plan of action. I felt stronger than I had in days, but Jessica wasn't going to like this. Not one bit. I found out just how much 3 days later when my phone rang at 8 in the morning. It was Jessica, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Mom, I just got a very interesting call from Eleanor Hartman's office. Something about you needing medical records released for a legal matter. What the hell are you doing?" How had she found out? Then I remembered. Jessica was listed as my emergency contact at Dr. Morrison's office. They must have called her when I requested my records be sent to Eleanor. I'm protecting myself, I said calmly. Protecting yourself from what? From your own daughter? I was trying to help you. By taking my house and putting me in your basement? By making sure you're taken care of? By making sure that house doesn't go to waste? Do you have any idea how much rental income? It's not your income, Jessica. It's my house. There was a long silence. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. You've hired a lawyer. Yes. That's how you want to play this? Fine. Mom, I'm going to say this once. You're making a huge mistake. You're 72 years old. You're not thinking clearly. Anyone can see that. Hiring a lawyer to fight your own family? That's not rational behavior. The implication hung in the air like poison. She was already building a narrative. Her elderly mother, acting irrationally, clearly not competent to manage her own affairs. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, Jessica. Clearer than I have in months, actually. We'll see what the courts think, she snapped and hung up. I sat there holding my phone, my hand shaking again. But this time, it wasn't just fear. It was anger. How dare she? How dare she threaten me, gaslight me, try to paint my self-defense as proof of incompetence? That evening, Eleanor called. I heard from my paralegal that there was some confusion at your doctor's office. Your daughter called. Yes, she threatened court action. Expected, Eleanor said calmly. Margaret, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my house, my garden, my memories, my independence. Yes, I said. I am. Good. Because we're about to make your position unassailable. Tomorrow, we file your trust. After that, Jessica will need a miracle to touch your assets. The point of no return had passed. This was war now, whether I'd wanted it or not. And I intended to win. The next week moved quickly. I signed the trust documents in Eleanor's office, officially placing my house and assets into a revocable living trust with Helen as trustee in case of my incapacity. Jessica was explicitly excluded from any decision-making role. Dr. Morrison completed my medical evaluation, cognitive function test, mental status examination, the works. The results were exactly what I'd hoped. Patient demonstrates excellent cognitive function, memory, and decision-making capacity for her age. No signs of dementia, impairment, or incompetence. Eleanor filed everything with the county recorder's office. My house was protected. I was protected. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt like I was waiting for a storm. It came on a Friday evening. Jessica and Derek showed up at my door at 7 o'clock. I could see through the window that Jessica was furious. Her face was flushed, her movements sharp and aggressive. Derek looked uncomfortable but determined. I considered not answering, but that would only delay the inevitable. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. You really did it, Jessica said, her voice shaking. You put the house in a trust. You cut me out completely. I protected my assets, I said calmly, as is my right. Your right? Jessica's voice rose. I'm your daughter. That house should come to me. You're stealing my inheritance. Jessica, I'm not dead yet. And when I am, my estate will be distributed according to my wishes, which I have every legal right to determine. Derek stepped forward, and I saw something in his face I'd never noticed before. Calculation. Greed. Margaret, you need to understand something. We've made plans based on that house. Financial plans. We took out a loan expecting— Expecting what? I interrupted. Expecting me to die soon. Expecting to control my property while I'm still alive. We're your family, Jessica shouted. How can you treat us like this? How can I— I stopped, took a breath. You tried to force me into your basement. You made plans to rent out my home without my consent. You're talking about my death like it's an investment opportunity. And you're asking how I can treat you badly. Jessica's face went from red to white. You'll regret this. We were trying to help you, and you've thrown it back in our faces. Fine. Don't expect to see your grandchildren anymore. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma and Kyle. I loved them dearly. But I couldn't let Jessica use them as weapons. If you want to punish your children because you can't control their grandmother, that's your choice, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But I won't be blackmailed. Derek pulled out his phone. We have evidence that you're not mentally stable. These trust documents, the paranoid behavior, turning against your own family, it all points to diminished capacity. Our lawyer says we have a strong case for guardianship. Your lawyer is lying to you to get your money, I said flatly. I have current medical evaluations from multiple doctors confirming my complete mental competence. Your case will fail, and you'll waste your money trying. We'll see, Jessica hissed. Maybe you're fine now, but who knows what could happen? A fall down the stairs, a stroke, a little memory loss? Things happen to elderly people all the time. And when they do, who do you think the courts will appoint as your guardian? Your sister in Seattle who barely visits, or your devoted daughter who lives 20 minutes away? The threat was clear, barely veiled. Was she suggesting she'd try to hurt me, or just wait for an opportunity to claim I was failing? Get out, I said quietly. Get out of my house, and don't come back unless you're invited. This is our last offer, Derek said. Sign the house over to Jessica now. We'll sell it, split the proceeds fairly, and you can use your share to buy into a nice assisted living facility. That's more than generous. Get out! Jessica stepped closer, her face inches from mine. You're going to die alone and miserable, and when you do, I'll make sure you get exactly what you deserve. Nothing. We'll contest the will. We'll drag your name through court. We'll make sure everyone knows what a selfish, vindictive old woman you really are. Leave, I said, my voice like ice. Now, or I call the police. They left finally, Derek pulling Jessica toward the car as she continued shouting threats. I closed the door, locked it, and for the first time since this began, I allowed myself to cry. For the next 3 days, I barely left my bedroom. I was exhausted, emotionally, physically, mentally. The confrontation had drained something from me, and Jessica's threat about the grandchildren hurt more than I wanted to admit. But on the 4th day, I woke up angry. And anger, I discovered, was much more useful than despair. The calls started the next day. First, it was my niece, Rachel, Jessica's cousin. Aunt Margaret, she said, her voice dripping with concern. Jessica told me what's happening. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Can't you two just talk it out? Family is so important. I explained calmly what Jessica had actually demanded. Rachel went quiet, then mumbled something about both sides and hung up. Then my neighbor, Carol, stopped by with a casserole. Margaret, dear, Jessica came to see me. She's worried about you living alone. She mentioned you've been acting a bit confused. She thinks you might need more support. Carol, I said directly, I'm not confused. Jessica wants my house. I said no. Now she's trying to convince people I'm incompetent. I'm not. Carol looked uncomfortable. Oh, well, I'm sure she didn't mean. She meant exactly that. Thank you for the casserole. The attempts continued throughout the week. Jessica's friends from her old high school, people from my church who Jessica had called, even Emma's school counselor reached out, saying Jessica had expressed concerns about my declining health. Each time, I explained the truth calmly and factually. Some people believed me. Others clearly thought I was the difficult elderly parent everyone warned about. The worst was when Father Michael from St. Catherine's called. "Margaret, I've known you for 30 years. Jessica came to me crying, saying you'd disowned her, that you were keeping her from the grandchildren." "Father, Jessica told me I couldn't see my grandchildren because I wouldn't give her my house. She's lying to you." There was a long pause. People often see the same situation differently. "No," I interrupted. "There aren't different sides here. There's the truth, and there's manipulation. Jessica is trying to isolate me by poisoning my relationships. I'm asking you, do I seem confused or incompetent to you?" "No," he admitted. "You seem perfectly lucid." "Then please don't enable her behavior by acting as if this is just a family disagreement. She attempted theft and is now engaged in a smear campaign." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table feeling utterly alone. Was this what it would be like now? Fighting off attacks from every direction, constantly defending my sanity to people who'd known me for years? That evening, I called Helen in Seattle. "I need to tell you what's happening," I said, and explained everything. Helen listened without interrupting. That was one of the things I loved about my sister. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. "That absolute bitch," Helen said finally. "I'm sorry, Maggie, but your daughter is a bitch. She always has been, if we're being honest. Remember when she was 16 and tried to trade your wedding ring for concert tickets? Despite everything, I laughed. I'd forgotten about that. Well, I haven't. Jessica has always been entitled, always thought the world owed her something. I'm glad you fought back, and I'm honored you named me as trustee. You'd never try to steal from me. No, I'd just show up and drink your wine while complaining about my ex-husband. Much more reasonable." Helen's tone turned serious. "Listen, I'm coming to Portland next week. I have vacation time saved up. I'll stay with you for a bit, and we'll face this together. You shouldn't have to do this alone." Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time from gratitude. "You don't have to." Family helps family, Maggie. Real family. Not whatever Jessica thinks family means. After we hung up, I felt stronger. Helen was right. I wasn't alone. The next day, I went to book club for the first time in 2 weeks. When I walked in, Eleanor was there. I'd forgotten she was a member. She gave me a subtle nod. During the break, several of the women approached me. Diane, who'd been coming to book club for 15 years, said quietly, "Margaret, I heard some rumors. I want you to know that I don't believe a word of it. You're one of the sharpest people I know." Others murmured agreement. Patricia, the retired school principal, added, "My daughter tried something similar with my mother before she passed. It's more common than people think. Elder financial abuse is an epidemic. If you need anything," Diane continued, "we're here. Witnesses, character references, whatever you need." I looked around at these women, my friends, my community, and felt something shift inside me. Jessica had tried to isolate me, but she'd underestimated the relationships I'd built over decades. "Thank you," I said, meaning it deeply. "That means more than you know." When I left book club that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Jessica could send flying monkeys and spread lies, but I had something stronger, the truth, and people who knew it. Let her try again. I was ready. Helen arrived on Tuesday, and her presence alone made the house feel safer. She'd barely unpacked when my doorbell rang. "Let me get it," Helen said, but I shook my head. "I need to face them eventually." It was Jessica and Derek, but this time they looked different. Jessica's face was composed, almost contrite. Derek carried a bouquet of flowers, my favorites, yellow roses. "Mom," Jessica said softly, "can we come in? Please. We want to talk. Really talk, I mean. No fighting." Every instinct screamed danger, but Helen was right behind me, and I was curious what game they were playing now. Fine, but my sister is staying. Jessica's smile tightened slightly when she saw Helen, but she maintained her pleasant expression. Aunt Helen, how nice to see you. Jessica, Helen said coolly. Derek. We sat in the living room, them on the couch, Helen and me in chairs positioned between them and the door. Derek placed the flowers on the coffee table. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, Jessica began. Her voice was gentle, reasonable. I realize I came on too strong. I should have approached it differently. It's just... She paused, as if gathering her emotions. I worry about you so much. This big house, you being alone. When Dad died, I promised him I'd take care of you. That was interesting. Robert had never asked any such thing, and Jessica knew it. I appreciate your concern, I said neutrally, but I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Of course you are, Derek interjected smoothly. We never meant to suggest otherwise. We just thought, wouldn't it be nice to have family close by? The kids miss you. Emma asks about you constantly. Then why did Jessica say I couldn't see them? I asked directly. Jessica had the grace to look embarrassed. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. Of course you can see the kids. You're their grandmother. I want to call her, Helen said suddenly. Emma, right now. Let's see if Jessica was telling the truth about her missing Margaret. Jessica's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of annoyance, before she recovered. They're at school, Aunt Helen. Then this evening. Sure. That's fine. Jessica turned back to me. Mom, here's what we're proposing. A fresh start. We forget about the basement thing. That was stupid, I admit it. But maybe we could compromise? What if you kept the house, but Derek and I helped manage it? We could handle maintenance, yard work, bills. We'd be like house managers. You'd still own it, but we'd help you with the burden of upkeep. And in exchange? I asked. Nothing, Jessica said quickly. Just the peace of mind that you're taken care of. You'd want access to the property, I said. Keys, probably access to my financial accounts to pay bills. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Well, it would be more efficient if you had control, I finished. Just not legal ownership. Yet, Jessica's expression hardened. Why are you being so suspicious? We're your family. We're trying to help you. No, Helen said flatly. You're trying to manipulate her into giving you control of her assets without the legal hassle of a guardianship petition. It's actually quite clever. Margaret gives you access. You gradually take over. And by the time she realizes what's happened, you're so entrenched that removing you becomes nearly impossible. Jessica's pleasant facade cracked completely. She stood up, her face flushing. You, she pointed at Helen, have always been a problem. Always putting ideas in Mom's head, always causing trouble. Jessica, sit down, Derek said nervously, but she ignored him. I came here trying to make peace, trying to find a solution that works for everyone, and you two are acting like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm her daughter. I have every right to be concerned about her welfare. You have the right to be concerned, I said calmly, but not to control, not to manipulate, and certainly not to take my property. That trust, Jessica said, her voice venomous now, is a joke. Do you know what my lawyer said? That trusts created under undue influence can be invalidated. And who do you think was influencing you? Your lawyer, who stands to make money from this conflict. And Helen, she gestured wildly at my sister, who probably wants the house for herself. That's absurd, Helen said. Is it? You fly in here, turn my mother against me, convince her to sign legal documents. Sounds like textbook elder manipulation to me. Derek stood up, trying to guide Jessica toward the door. Honey, maybe we should. She shook him off. No, I'm tired of being treated like the villain here. Mom, you're going to regret this. When you're lying in a hospital bed someday and you need family, don't expect me to come running. When you need someone to make medical decisions for you, don't expect me to care. You want to cut me out? Fine. But don't come crying to me later. That sounds like a threat, I said quietly. It's a promise, Jessica snapped. You think you're so smart with your lawyers and your trust? Wait until you actually need help. Wait until you fall or get sick or can't remember where you are. Let's see how helpful Aunt Helen and your book club friends are then. She grabbed Derek's arm and stormed toward the door, then turned back one last time. And another thing, you can forget about Christmas, forget about birthdays, forget about being part of this family. You made your choice. I hope your house keeps you warm at night, because that's all you'll have left. The door slammed behind them. Helen and I sat in silence for a moment. Then Helen said, "Well, that went about as expected." I realized I was shaking, but not from fear, from anger. Jessica had tried to sweet-talk me, manipulate me, and when that failed, threatened me into submission. She really thought I'd fall for that? I said. People like Jessica think everyone else is as manipulable as they are. She genuinely believed she could fake contrition, offer a compromise, and say, "And you'd hand over control." And when it didn't work, she showed exactly who she is. She threatened to abandon me if I get sick. Yes, and you need to document that, now, while it's fresh. Helen was right. I got my notebook and wrote down everything, every word, every threat, every manipulation attempt. The mask had slipped completely, and I'd seen the truth underneath. Jessica wanted control, wanted my assets, and she'd say or do anything to get them. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. 3 weeks later, I got the summons. Jessica had filed a guardianship petition, just as Eleanor had predicted she might. The court date was set for November 15th, exactly 1 month away. According to the documents, Jessica claimed I was suffering from dementia, unable to manage my affairs, and vulnerable to exploitation by outside parties, meaning Helen and Eleanor, presumably. Eleanor reviewed the paperwork in her office. "This is actually good news," she said. "How is being dragged to court good news? Because guardianship hearings are public. Everything will be on the record. And Jessica's case is extremely weak. She has no medical evidence, because none exists. No documentation of incompetence, no witnesses to confused behavior. Nothing. All she has is her word that you're unfit, against your documented medical evidence that you're completely competent. So we'll win. We'll annihilate her case," Eleanor said with satisfaction. "Trust me." The next month was a blur of preparation. Eleanor assembled my medical records, bank statements showing my competent financial management, testimony from friends about my mental clarity, even a letter from Father Michael confirming I'd seemed perfectly lucid and rational in all our conversations. Helen stayed with me through all of it, her presence a constant source of strength. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in my best suit. Burgundy, professional, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral. Helen drove me to the courthouse. Eleanor met us outside. "Remember," Eleanor said, "stay calm, answer questions directly, don't let Jessica provoke you. The judge will see through any theatrics." We entered courtroom 4B at 9 o'clock. Jessica and Derek were already there with their lawyer, a middle-aged man named Harrington, who looked distinctly uncomfortable as he reviewed his notes. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Moreno. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense and fiercely protective of seniors' rights. Eleanor had been pleased when we learned she'd been assigned to our case. "This is a petition for guardianship," Judge Moreno began, reading from the file. "Ms. Patterson, you're seeking to be appointed guardian of your mother, Margaret Patterson, claiming she lacks capacity to make decisions. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Jessica said, her voice properly respectful. My mother has been making increasingly irrational decisions. She's turned against her family, signed legal documents without fully understanding them, and has been influenced by people who don't have her best interests at heart. And you have medical evidence of this incapacity? Harrington stood. Your Honor, we have testimony from family members about Mrs. Patterson's behavior, which clearly indicates— I asked about medical evidence, Judge Moreno interrupted. Evaluations from physicians, psychiatrists, neurologists. Do you have any? We have documentation that Mrs. Patterson's previous physician expressed concerns. Actually, Eleanor stood. Dr. Morrison never expressed any such concerns. In fact, he conducted a comprehensive evaluation at Mrs. Patterson's request and found her to be of sound mind and excellent cognitive function. I have his report here, dated October 18th. She handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Moreno read it carefully. This evaluation was done 1 month before this petition was filed. Dr. Morrison states clearly that Mrs. Patterson shows no signs of dementia, cognitive impairment, or diminished capacity. He notes her memory is excellent, her judgment sound, and her ability to manage her affairs unimpaired. She looked at Harrington. Do you have anything to contradict this? Your Honor, medical evaluations can miss subtle signs of decline. The family sees day-to-day behavior that doctors might not. Then call your witnesses, Judge Moreno said. Jessica took the stand first. She painted a picture of a confused, paranoid mother who'd suddenly turned against her loving family. She described my hiring of Eleanor as out of character, my trust creation, as clearly the result of manipulation, and my refusal to give her access to my home as irrational suspicion. Then Eleanor began her cross-examination. Ms. Patterson, on October 8th, you went to your mother's home and told her you'd decided to rent out her house and move her into your basement. Is that correct? I was trying to help her. Please answer yes or no. Yes, but— And when she refused, you became angry? I was frustrated that she couldn't see I was trying to help her. Eleanor pulled out her notes. Did you say, and I quote, "This is happening, Mom. Derek's already talked to a property manager. We can have tenants in here by the 1st of the month?" Jessica hesitated. I may have said something like that, but it was taken out of context. Did you subsequently tell your mother that she would regret refusing you? That she'd die alone and miserable? I was angry. People say things when they're angry. Did you tell your mother you would prevent her from seeing her grandchildren unless she complied with your demands? No, that's not— Your mother took notes immediately after that conversation. Would you like me to read them to the court? Jessica's face went pale. Eleanor continued relentlessly. Ms. Patterson, isn't it true that you attempted to gain control of your mother's property not out of concern for her welfare, but for your own financial benefit? That you and your husband took out a loan expecting to profit from her home? Objection, Harrington stood. Speculation. Your Honor, Mr. Patterson admitted this to Mrs. Patterson during their confrontation. I can call her to testify to that conversation. I'll allow it, Judge Moreno said, leaning forward with interest. We made some financial plans, Jessica admitted, her voice tight. But that doesn't mean I don't care about my mother's welfare. Yet your proposed solution involved taking her home and putting her in your basement? It was a reasonable suggestion. For whom? Eleanor asked pointedly. Certainly not for a healthy, independent 72-year-old woman who owns her own home free and clear. The hearing continued for another hour. Eleanor called Dr. Morrison, who testified to my excellent health. She called Diane from book club, who testified to my sharp mind and active social life. She called Father Michael, who testified to my complete lucidity. Finally, Judge Moreno called me to the stand. Mrs. Patterson, she said kindly, I'm going to ask you some questions. Please take your time answering. She went through a basic competency evaluation: date, time, location, current events. I answered each question clearly and accurately. Then she asked about my finances, my home maintenance, my daily life. I explained everything in detail: my budget, my property tax payments, my medical insurance, my social activities. "And why did you create a trust?" Judge Moreno asked. "To protect myself, Your Honor. After my daughter tried to take my house, I realized I needed legal protection to ensure my assets remain under my control." "Did anyone pressure you to create this trust?" "No, Your Honor. It was entirely my decision, made in consultation with my attorney after careful consideration." Judge Moreno nodded slowly, then looked at Jessica. "Ms. Patterson, I've reviewed all the evidence presented today. I find no basis whatsoever for your petition. Your mother is clearly competent, capable, and fully able to manage her own affairs. This appears to be a case of family conflict, not incompetence." She turned back to me. "Mrs. Patterson, your guardianship petition is denied. You retain full control of your affairs and property. Furthermore," she looked sternly at Jessica, "I'm noting in the record that this petition appears to have been filed in bad faith, as an attempt to gain control of property rather than out of genuine concern. If another frivolous petition is filed, I will not look favorably upon it." The gavel came down. I'd won. The aftermath of the hearing was swift and brutal for Jessica. Within days, word had spread throughout our community about what had happened. In a town like ours, a public guardianship hearing was practically front-page news, especially one as dramatic as ours had been. The court records were public, and apparently several people I knew had attended the hearing as observers. Jessica had gambled everything on winning that petition, and she'd lost spectacularly. The first consequence came from her own social circle. Carol, my neighbor, told me she'd seen Jessica at the grocery store, and several women had literally turned away from her. "People don't take kindly to someone trying to steal their mother's house," Carol said with satisfaction, "especially using the courts to do it." Then Derek lost his job. His employer, a family-owned construction company, was run by a man named Tom Rodriguez, who'd been friends with Robert. When Tom heard about the guardianship attempt and Derek's admission in court about taking out loans based on his expectation of getting my house, he'd been appalled. Derek was fired for ethical concerns. Jessica called me 3 days after the hearing. I almost didn't answer, but Eleanor had advised me to document any contact, so I put her on speaker with Helen present. "Mom, Derek lost his job," Jessica said without preamble. "Because of you, because of what happened in court." "Because of what you did in court," I corrected. "You tried to have me declared incompetent, Jessica. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" "We're going to lose the house," she said, and I heard real panic in her voice. "The bank is calling in our loan. We can't make the payments without Derek's income." "Then you should have thought of that before taking out a loan based on property you didn't own and might never inherit." "Please," Jessica said, and for a moment she sounded like the little girl she'd once been. "Please, Mom. We're desperate. Just a loan. 50,000. We'll pay you back." "No. Mom, we're about to lose everything. Don't you care? Did you care when you tried to force me into your basement? When you tried to steal my home? When you told me I'd die alone and miserable?" Silence. "You made your choices, Jessica. Now live with the consequences." I hung up. Helen looked at me with something like awe. "That was ice cold. Was it wrong?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "No," Helen said firmly. "She tried to destroy you. She doesn't get to demand rescue now that it backfired." Over the next few weeks, I learned more about Jessica and Derek's situation. They'd taken out a home equity loan on their own house, borrowed against the value, expecting to pay it back with rental income from my property. With Derek unemployed and their finances in chaos, they couldn't make payments. The bank foreclosed within 2 months. Jessica, Derek, and my grandchildren moved into a small rental apartment across town. Jessica had to take a job at a retail store. her first job in 15 years since she'd been a stay-at-home mother. Derek found work doing odd jobs, nothing stable. I heard all of this through the community grapevine. Jessica didn't call again. Part of me felt guilty. Should I help them? They were still family. Emma and Kyle had done nothing wrong, but Eleanor was blunt when I mentioned my concerns. Margaret, if you help them now, you're teaching Jessica that her behavior has no real consequences. You're telling her that she can abuse you, attack you, try to steal from you, and still fall back on your support. That's not love. That's enabling. Helen agreed. Jessica is an adult. She made adult decisions. Now she faces adult consequences. If you bail her out, she'll do it again. Maybe not to you, but to someone. Her kids will learn that manipulation and exploitation are acceptable if you're desperate enough. They were right. I knew they were right. But the guilt lingered until I got a package in the mail 3 weeks later. Inside was a letter from Emma, my granddaughter. She wrote, "Dear Grandma, Mom told us we can't see you anymore. She said you were mean to her. But I heard Mom and Dad talking, and I know what really happened. I know they tried to take your house. I'm sorry. I still love you. Can we write letters? I miss you. Love, Emma." I sat at my kitchen table and cried, but this time from relief. Emma knew the truth. She'd figured it out, and she'd reached out. I wrote back immediately, sending the letter to her school address. She'd included it in her note. I told her I loved her, that none of this was her fault, and yes, we could absolutely write letters. 2 days later, Kyle sent a letter too. Then they both started calling from their friends' phones, away from Jessica's oversight. Jessica had tried to use my grandchildren as weapons. Instead, she'd lost their respect. They saw through her manipulation, and they'd chosen me. That was the moment I knew I'd truly won. Not because Jessica had lost her house or Derek his job, but because the next generation had learned the right lessons. You don't exploit family. You don't manipulate people you claim to love. And actions have consequences. Justice, I realized, wasn't always pretty, but it was necessary. 6 months after the hearing, my life had transformed in ways I never expected. Helen had officially retired and moved to Portland, buying a condo just 15 minutes from my house. We had dinner together twice a week, sometimes more. She'd been right that night in my kitchen. Real family helps family, and having her close was a blessing I hadn't known I needed. The house that Jessica had tried so hard to take from me became truly mine again. I'd spent weeks after the hearing reclaiming it emotionally, painting rooms, updating furniture, making it feel fresh and new rather than like a fortress under siege. My garden flourished. I'd planted new roses, redesigned the entire backyard with help from a landscape designer Helen and I hired together. The grandchildren visited regularly now. Emma was 14 now and helped me with my computer and phone, teaching me things, patient and kind. Kyle, at 11, spent Saturday mornings helping me in the garden. He had Robert's hands, I'd realized, gentle with plants, understanding how to nurture growing things. Jessica had tried to forbid these visits initially, but Derek, to his credit, had finally grown a spine. "They're kids, not prisoners," he'd told her, according to Emma. "If they want to see their grandmother, that's their choice." It was perhaps the first time in their marriage that Derek had stood up to Jessica, and apparently it had shocked her into silence. I'd learned through the children that Jessica and Derek's marriage was deteriorating. They fought constantly about money, about the choices that had led to their financial ruin, about whose fault it all was. Emma told me, sadly, that her mother had become bitter and angry, blaming everyone but herself. Me, Derek, Derek's former boss, the bank, the judge. "She doesn't understand that she did this to herself," Emma had said, with a wisdom beyond her years. "Does she, Grandma?" "No, sweetheart," I'd replied. "Some people never learn that lesson." Meanwhile, my own life had expanded in beautiful ways. Book club had become more than just a monthly meeting. The women had become true friends, a support network I relied on and contributed to. When Patricia's husband had a stroke, we organized meal deliveries. When Diane's daughter got divorced, we helped her move. When Eleanor closed a difficult case, we celebrated with champagne. I'd started volunteering at the library 3 days a week instead of 2, working with the literacy program, teaching adults to read. It was meaningful work, fulfilling work. One of my students, a 52-year-old woman named Maria, had cried when she read her first complete book. "You gave me this," she'd said. "Thank you." I'd also started dating, something I never thought I'd do again at 73. His name was Frank, a retired teacher who'd started coming to book club as the token male member. We'd bonded over our shared love of mystery novels and had progressed to dinner dates, long walks, and increasingly frequent companionship. Nothing serious yet, but pleasant. Life-affirming. "Your mother is dating," Jessica had apparently shrieked when Emma mentioned it. "She's 73 years old. That's inappropriate." Emma had rolled her eyes when recounting this to me. "Mom's just jealous that you're happy and she's miserable." Out of the mouths of babes, my finances, which Jessica had claimed I couldn't manage, were better than ever. Eleanor had connected me with a financial advisor who'd helped me reorganize my investments. I was actually making more money now than when Robert was alive, and I'd set up education funds for Emma and Kyle, funds that Jessica couldn't touch, administered by Helen as trustee until they turned 21. I'd also updated my will, making my intentions crystal clear. The bulk of my estate would go to Emma and Kyle directly, with Helen as executor. Jessica would receive a token amount, $10,000, with a clause explaining exactly why. "I leave this limited amount to my daughter Jessica because, while I will always love her, I cannot reward the betrayal of trust, the attempted theft, and the emotional manipulation she engaged in during the last years of my life. I hope she learns from her choices." Eleanor had advised me that such clauses were rarely enforceable and could be challenged, but I didn't care. I wanted my reasoning documented. I wanted Emma and Kyle to understand why, someday when they read the will, I'd made these choices. As for Jessica and Derek, their fall continued. Derek had found steady work eventually, but at a fraction of his former salary. Jessica's retail job was exactly as she'd feared. Exhausting, poorly paid, humiliating for someone who'd spent 15 years as a comfortable stay-at-home mother. They'd declared bankruptcy, destroying their credit for years. I heard through Carol that Jessica had started seeing a therapist. Apparently, Derek had insisted, threatening divorce if she didn't. Whether it would help, I didn't know. Narcissists rarely changed, Eleanor had told me, but sometimes rock bottom forced a reckoning. Part of me hoped Jessica would learn, would grow, would eventually apologize and try to rebuild our relationship. I'd forgive her if she did. Not forget, but forgive. I was still her mother, after all, but I no longer needed her forgiveness or her approval or her presence in my life to be happy. I had Helen, Frank, my grandchildren, my friends, my home, my garden, my books, my students, my life. Jessica had tried to take everything from me, and instead, she'd lost everything herself. Sometimes karma doesn't wait for the next life. Sometimes it arrives right on schedule in this one. And watching it unfold, I felt not vindictive satisfaction, but rather a peaceful acceptance. Justice had been served. Life had gone on. And I was surprisingly happier at 73 than I'd been in years. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well. So that's my story. The tale of how my daughter tried to steal my house and ended up losing everything. What did I learn? That family doesn't give anyone the right to exploit you. That protecting yourself isn't selfishness, it's survival. That sometimes love means saying no and enforcing boundaries, even when it hurts. I learned that you're never too old to fight for yourself, never too old to start over, never too old to find happiness. Most importantly, I learned that the people who truly love you will support your autonomy, not try to control it. Now I want to ask you, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have stood firm or given in? Have you experienced something similar with family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family, boundaries, and the courage to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, your life is yours. Don't let anyone take it from you.